Hey, welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. We're going to talk a little bit about evil. So there's a saying, a rubric, a truism, never assign to malice what can be explained by incompetence. And there's a point to that, but it's not a law of nature. Okay, just remember that is not a law of nature. It's a point when you're seeking human motivations, when you're looking at, do I get pissed off at this person or do I help solve the problem? Because that's a big deal, In that context, it's something to really think about. But this is where we get off into fun territory. But there's also, once is happenstance, once is an accident, twice is happenstance, three times is enemy action. And we're dealing with some pretty serious enemy action right now. I believe, I cannot help but believe that the level to which the coronavirus responses have gone, like the consistency with which science gets ignored, human needs get ignored, the suicide keeps getting pushed off the table. It will not be discussed, okay? Unemployment is seen as a good because we want to remove jobs from people. We want to remove the productive population because they are, well, kind of excess, and we have too many people. And, there's all this, the mask, they've got this social distancing at exactly the right distance to fuck you up psychologically. Think about that. You can't pick it any better than this. It just fucks you up psychologically. It also has to do with your biome. We talk about the biome, but the truth is that only about 30% of you is you. There's a lot of organisms in you, and that transmission that we get from each other keeps us very healthy. As someone in isolation can get very sick and go mad. There's a lot of bad things that happen. We're not just social creatures in the psychological sense, but we're social creatures in a physical sense. And there are problems with social distancing. There are problems with the idea that you're never supposed to come into unsanitary contact with other people, that your community loses that communal biome. Very serious problems that we're not going to be allowed to know about, and they're not going to tell you about, but we know they're there, okay? And exercise, getting outside, doing exercise, getting out and turning off the TV and seeing the sunlight. All these things are considered bad with coronavirus, and it's one of those areas where up to a point, you can see this as just stupid. Like they're really dumb, not malicious. And on an individual level, when you're dealing with Karen in a store who's reeing at you because you're not wearing a mask, or because you didn't do this right thing, or you did that wrong thing, or you didn't sanitize your hands before you touched the orange, or whatever the fuck she's going on about. She's not necessarily malicious. There's probably a malicious aspect of it where she feels like she's getting a boost to herself at your expense. Okay, that's a very big problem with humanity. People need to not be trained to feel better because someone else feels worse. Okay, feeling better should be something that comes from within, from your environment, from positive aspects, not from pushing people down. And that does happen. It's a part of human psychology, but it's a part of human psychology that does not have to be trained to be dominant in all people, and that's what they're doing. They're training that to be dominant in all people, instead of there's a point to it. There's an intelligible point to it in a moral sense, on a very limited, extremely limited, way limited basis. But it's not limited. It's how people. It's the idea of progressive power ideologies. And remember that they don't have the concept of doing it for nice. We talked about that with the LA Times lady. They don't have the concept of doing something to be nice, of doing something because you're part of the society, doing something positive. There are restrictions because you're part of society. You're not allowed to do this because society is more important. That's negative. All right, the positive aspects, positive sharing. Sharing your food, inviting the neighbors over, plowing their driveway, not asking them for their church affiliation or what is political ideology. Same thing, church affiliation. Before you plow their driveway or something. The progressives don't get this. Okay, they can't understand the concept of nice, and that's a really big deal going into this whole idea of evil and maliciousness. Putting other people down to pump yourself up becomes a very fundamental thing when you don't have the concept of nice, when you can't get yourself feeling better because you've helped other people or because things are nice. This is really broken and really negative, and it's really intentionally trained into the progressive left. And I think that we're way past the idea of stumbling with this coronavirus, the way the news is being handled, the way the election was handled, the way the Capitol events were handled, the way all of the various riots and demonstrations have been handled. We're dealing with something that is absolutely evil, and I suspect that we're dealing with something that is actually a conspiracy. Is it a conscious conspiracy? I don't know. Is it a spiritual conspiracy? I don't know. I don't know what kind of conspiracy we're dealing with, but I feel like we're dealing with actual forces of evil. And my personal moral aspect or definition, picture, map, tunnel reality on this is that we have pro-human forces. The vision. I won't explain my vision, but the vision of positive humanity and humane futures and such. That's very positive. It's pro-human. And then you have anti-human, and pretty much everything from the top down that the left is doing is anti-human. And I don't want to make it right-left that way, because there's plenty of people on the right who are authoritarian leftists and are part of this. It's not a left-right thing. I'm using the word very, very loosely. Please do not assume that this is political. But there's an anti-human, anti-freedom, anti-human potential group going on, and whether they're in a conscious conspiracy or not, there's definitely evil, and the actions are intentional, even if the combined strategy is only a spiritual similarity. You deal with people. Bill Gates, man, how, is he doing? How do you get this way? I mean, seriously, the guy wants to single-handedly, on his own dime, with his own authority, with no government influence, he's in charge, change the Earth's ecology globally, because he knows and he's in charge. He wants to literally control through regulation what foods you can and cannot eat. It's the meat and the 3D printed pseudo meat thing, and vaccine passports. He really wants to. He's a full advocate. He stated very bluntly that he wants people to not be allowed to participate in society without a specific digital passport that shows their compliance factors. What do you do, man? You can't make this stuff up, okay? If you made this stuff up, people would, yes, you'd be a conspiracy theorist, but you can go watch it. You can go read. This is USA Today. This is CNN. They're bragging about it. What the hell? Anyway, I think that there is very real evil going on. And in a way, it's kind of cool, Because instead of having to deal with the anti-human forces as accidental or, individually malicious or root psychology, subconscious activities, you have something that is very real and very evil that you can actually fight, that you can actually focus on, that you can actually address, that you can confront. Okay, confront is a huge deal. It's a big deal for human interaction. It's a big deal for human actualization. The ability to face something and say, this, no, or say, this I will accept. This I will accept and fight against. All of these things, this is confronting. The ability to face something. It's really nice when you have something that you can face. And I think that quite a lot of what's going on with progressive, transnational, cosmopolitan, whatever the fuck you want to call it, modern globalism, let's say globalism instead of leftism. How about that? Like that one? Because they're kind of fascist anyway. Globalism. One of the things about that is that they do twist everything together. Okay, I talked about this in a previous video where everything's very twisty. The hedonism but the rules. Like they make it all twisty so you can't pull it apart and make sense of it. That's on purpose. Okay, they don't want you to be able to confront this and say, this is evil. And part of that, of course, is that they'll take something like blowjobs. Okay. General sexual activity, and they'll say, oh, well, if you don't approve of my version of it, then you don't approve of it at all, and you think there should be no sex at all. And see, they're trying to twist you and twist it. You're not allowed to have pleasure unless you have their definition of excess pleasure, or say they're talking about social justice is a huge one. You're not allowed to say, yes, I want to feed this poor family down the street because you've denied their demand for some sort of welfare UBI scheme. It's all very twisty, okay? And they try to take away your positives. They do that dramatically with things like alternative energy, and it's really funny because a lot of homesteaders, a lot of super conservative out there people are really into alternative energy, okay? On their farm, on their homestead. They want to be off the grid. They want to generate their own solar and wind power and water power, and but they're against green energy on a policy level. And there are differences. The idea of the plant mentality, the centralized plant mentality of wind power is bogus. Okay, the whole thing is just ridiculously bogus. But notice that, the cosmopolitan globalist left, can't avoid saying the word, has tried to take that from you. Take energy independence, take that freedom, that technologically positive, forward-looking thing away from you. Look at bicycles. Bicycles are a fantastic example. Bicycles are a fantastically independent means of transportation. They're great for your health. Everything about them is fantastic, and they used to be not held up as a specifically socialist thing. And I don't even mean globalist or anything. I mean right on socialism, okay? It is now considered a badge of socialist honor to have certain kinds of fixed-wheel bikes, to ride your bike in a certain way. There's they take bikes from you. They take exercise from you. They try to take everything away from you if you're not part of their globalist elitism. And that's in that twisty thing that I'm talking about, okay? You can't just face it and say, no, this is evil. But that's what you have to do. You have to get rid of their logic games. You have to get rid of their desire to invalidate your feelings of morality through twisty logic games. You need to just say, no, this one's wrong. this one's right. It doesn't matter why. I can tell this one's wrong, this one's right. Now, you do need to be able to discuss it and think about it and think it through, but the way you think it through is complementary, not in an adversarial fashion. This is one of those post-axial things that I really hate, is the idea that all conversation and exploration of ideas has to be adversarial instead of complementary. And that is one of those things that I really think the globalists did to fuck with your head. And that goes back, yeah, this means the conspiracy goes back a ways, but this goes back a ways. The idea of adversarial exploration of ideas instead of complementary exploration of ideas. Brainwashing instead of brainstorming. So stay tuned. We're going to get back into the edges of society here in a moment.